Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining the Quarkus Deep Dive session, part 3. So last couple of days, we took a deep dive into Quarkus. We went through the introduction, features, why Quarkus is used, the performance of Quarkus. We coded a few applications with Quarkus. We also integrated Quarkus application with database. So today we will start comparing Quarkus with other frameworks like Spring. There is a good competitor of Quarkus, which is Micronaut. So we will see what differences are there, which is better, and which one to use in our project, depending upon situation. So let's see what's the difference between Spring Boot and Quarkus. So both are Java frameworks, Spring Boot and Quarkus. We will perform some tests today to understand how is the performance of Spring Boot and what is the performance of Quarkus. So Spring Boot is a Java-based framework focusing on enterprise application. It connects all Spring projects and help to accelerate developers' productivity by offering many production-ready integration. By doing so, it reduces the amount of configuration and the boilerplate coding. So one of the example of boilerplate coding which we saw the other day was we don't have to write getters, setters, and all. Furthermore, thanks to Spring Framework, to its convention over configuration approach, which is automatically registers default configurations based on dependencies available at the class path in the runtime. So Spring Boot considerably reduces the time to market for many Java applications. Now, what Quarkus does, we have already seen in past, but I'll quickly summarize it. So Quarkus is another framework with a similar approach as that of Spring Boot, but with an additional promise of delivering smaller artifact. So the size of the rendered application is small, with faster boot time, better resource utilization, and efficiency. So Quarkus is optimized for cloud, serverless, and containerized environments. But despite this slightly different focus, Quarkus also integrates well with most popular Java frameworks. So as I mentioned earlier, like both the framework integrate well with other projects and frameworks. However, internal implementation of Spring Boot and Quarkus are different. So Spring Boot offers web capabilities in two flavors. That is blocking servlets and non-blocking web flux. However, what Quarkus does, it offers both approaches, but slightly different from Spring Boot. It allows us to use both blocking and non-blocking strategies simultaneously. So that is one of the major architectural difference. So that was like a lot of theory. Before showing you these numbers and all, let me go ahead and actually run some application. So I already showed you Quarkus initialized. It's a code.quarkus.io. All the libraries, dependencies, we can go ahead and select from here. Spring also has similar initializer where you can go ahead and add your dependencies. So if I would like to ask you guys to vote based on what you are seeing on my screen. So this is Quarkus initializer, this is Spring initializer. Which one do you find is more suitable from development perspective? I won't say my preference, but I would like to hear from you guys. Do you like the Quarkus initializer or do you like the Spring? Okay, I see everyone muted. Why don't you unmute yourself and speak out?
Hey, Nathan, I think both are good, and it really depends on the one that you are used to using. So I am very much used to the Spring initializer. So right now I will prefer Spring initializer only.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was the point which I was trying to bring out. Both Spring and Quarkus provides you an bootstrap initializer, which caters the requirements. So at this point, I would give points both to Quarkus as 1 and Spring as 1. So both are at same level. Now, using Spring and using Quarkus, what I've done, I've downloaded application. Let me pull it here. Both are same application, a Spring web application. So both Quarkus, which is opened here, the demo program. And so demo program is for Spring. This code.quarkus is for Quarkus. What I'll do right now, I'll go ahead and I'll execute both of them, and we will see what is the performance difference between Spring and Quarkus. So to separate, let me pull Quarkus on the right and Spring on the left. I'll go ahead and I'll start. What I've done here, I have changed the port. So Spring by default runs on 8080. I have left it to run on 8080. For Quarkus, I've gone ahead and I've changed the port to 8082. So right side is Quarkus. Already a lot of applications are running on my laptop right now. So these tests are not ideal, but this will give us like a slight picture of what is the performance difference. So the ideal testing strategy would be, I should close all the applications. I should only run Spring Boot on one side and then stop it and then run Quarkus on the other side. But for simplicity, and to save the time, I'll go ahead right now. So Quarkus running on 8082, Spring running on 8080. I'll go ahead and I'll start the Spring Boot application. What both the application does is there is a REST endpoint, same class, REST endpoint, and REST endpoint here as well. Both does the same thing. It returns hello Spring, hello Spring. So I've kept the classes same to understand that there are no coding differences between the frameworks right now. Now I'll go ahead. So Spring is up. I'll go ahead and bring Quarkus up. All right, so Quarkus is also coming up. One difference which we will notice here is Quarkus is running on 8082. Spring have started on 8080. So Spring have started on 8080. Now what I'll do, I'll go ahead and open JConsole. So to open JConsole, I'm in my command prompt. I'll go ahead and type JConsole. That brings up the JConsole here. So first, let's check the demo application. And then we will check Quarkus. So demo application is running here. Spring Boot run. So this is the one for Spring Boot run. I connect to Spring Boot run. Since I'm running these on local. So we see almost like 1 second. Let me exit it once and click on new connection. So my demo application, I'll go ahead and select my demo. Use 20 MB. All right. So by default, when we run the application, Spring uses almost 7,000 classes, right? So let me bring up Quarkus as well so that we can have a one-to-one comparison. Quarkus, is it Quarkus? Yeah, this one is Quarkus. It's difficult to see here. Let me expand this window a little bit. All right, so now what we are seeing, we are comparing the performance of both Quarkus and Spring for the simple Bootstrap application. Now, right side is Quarkus, left side is Spring. So if we see by default, Spring loads approximately 7,000 classes, whereas Quarkus, it loads 5,900, so relatively lesser classes. This difference we are noticing because what Quarkus does is it goes ahead and it removes the unnecessary classes which are not required during the runtime. That is the reason why we are noticing this difference of like close to 1,000 classes. And when our application, which should not impact the memory more, so these differences counts a lot. Now, the application for Quarkus, which I'm running right now, it is not just a simple application. So by default, Quarkus also provides us the dev UI, the endpoint integration. So by that, what I mean is Quarkus is running on 8082 dev. So Quarkus application also provides us these out-of-box portal where we can go ahead and check list of endpoints, CDI overview, and edit our configurations, right? But what Spring Boot Bootstrap provided us, just a simple Spring is hosted on 8080, so just a simple greeting class which gives us hello string. So what I'm trying to infer from this is for small tasks, Spring was using a lot of more classes and memory. However, Quarkus, even though it provided a lot of other features out of the box when we started with the Bootstrap template, still the memory consumption and the performance is less. So in demo application, I'm not doing anything. I have just like 28 live threads. In Quarkus, I have less than 15 live threads, even though I was using Quarkus. CPU usage, you see these spikes here because I was triggering request in Quarkus for dev UI, the endpoints and other things. But when we are not triggering it, the CPU usage is like almost null. In Spring, once I triggered the localhost 8080, this is the spike which you see. So over a period of time, if we see the classes are increasing in Spring, it is somewhere close to 7,249. When we started the Spring application, the number of classes was slightly less than 7,000, but now it has increased to 7,240. So this clearly signifies that Quarkus provides a better performance in boot up and in runtime. So this heap memory which you are seeing here, that is because our Quarkus application has a lot of functionality. But our Spring application, the Spring Boot application, it doesn't have any functionality apart from the greeting class. So hope these graphs is clear to everyone. I'll wait for questions if you guys have any, because this is very important and significant difference between Spring and Quarkus. Does this chart make sense? Okay. I'll assume silence as yes, it makes sense. And then I'll bring down these things. All right. So now I'll open the localhost 8080 again. That is the Spring greeting application. And what I'll do in this greeting application, I'll go ahead and make some changes. So I'll say hello world Spring, and I'll hit save. Right? Once I hit save, so this is Spring Boot. Once I hit save and I refresh the page, there are no changes. So my changes did not reflected in runtime in Spring. Even though these changes were minimal, think of a scenario where I'm writing 1,000 lines of code, right? But while writing those 1,000 lines of code, for first 50 lines, I want to check my result. There is no other option but to go ahead, kill the server in Spring, and then start it again. We can run it in debug mode to debug it. But this is the go. So when we make changes in Spring, we need to compile our classes again and rebuild it, and then bring the application back. Once the application is back, then if I go ahead and run, I see hello world Spring. So my changes have reflected. So that was Spring. Coming to Quarkus. Quarkus was on my right side. We see that Quarkus application is running on 8082. Currently, it says hello Spring from Quarkus. Okay, before making the change, first I want to show you what it actually brings. So I go ahead and open localhost 8082. And then the greeting class. I hope the path is greeting in Quarkus as well. That's greeting. So if I hit localhost 8082 greeting, I get hello Spring. Now I'll go ahead and change the code. Hello world Spring from Quarkus. Okay, I've changed the code. I receive a message here which says live reload total time 1.6. I go ahead, refresh the page, and it says hello world Spring from Quarkus. So that is again one of the major key difference between developing an application in Spring and developing an application from Quarkus. It supports live reloading. And in our previous day's discussion, we already saw that the live reloading feature of Quarkus not just work for the code, it also works for the application properties. So when we went ahead on the day 2, when we went ahead and when we configured the database properties here, even the database connection was loaded on the fly without restarting the application. So that is one of the significant difference between Spring and Quarkus. Now I will wait and I'll ask you guys to vote whether in favor of Spring or in favor of Quarkus for this particular feature.
Nitin, one doubt.
Mhm.
So on during session of this Quarkus, you showed like when you change this port, you restarted this application.
Yeah, so port is
Right.
something which we
So my
configure for the first time, right?
yeah, I'm going it. So when you're showing this URL of /u/dev for Quarkus, there's one config portal, right, in which there is port configured. So when we will be changing the port there also, so we need to restart this again,
No,
or will it take it?
it should work live.
So can you show it right now?
We should check it. I haven't
Yeah.
tested that functionality, but we can test it. So port is something which is configured at the first time when we start. Let's see if port works or not. But other configurations like DB or any other variables which we have declared, those work on the fly. So let's open the dev UI. Good point. Let's test it. So localhost 8082, dev UI, configure it. If we change it to 8083, and if other port is not using it, it says configuration updated successfully. I don't know if it updated here or not. Okay, it updated here as well on the fly. Now, let's check if we need to compile this again or it starts working on the fly. So 8083 / greeting. Okay, so for this, for changing the port, we will have to compile it again. But changing the configuration, it should work on the fly. So that's why I was not referring the port in the beginning, and I was referring to the database configurations, which we discussed the other day. So if we want to run on 8083, I'll have to compile it again. So I bring down this, and then I compile it again. Hopefully it should say Quarkus is up on 8083. All right. Quarkus is up on 8083, so I click on this. Why does it took only local? Localhost 8083 greeting. Okay, so now Quarkus is up on. So for port changes, we definitely need to compile it again. But for configuration changes, like our username, password, credentials, or any variable which the class uses. So those are config entries, we don't have to compile it. The compilation works on them.
Okay.
Hope that makes sense.
Yeah. Yes. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay. So I would like you all to vote in favor of Spring or in favor of Quarkus. I will look for thumbs up or reactions in the chat. How many of you are in favor of Quarkus and how many of you are in favor of Spring? No one? Okay, how many of you are in favor of Spring at least? Thumbs up. Hope everyone is listening to my question. Okay, so for the live, okay, now I see chat coming in. So thumbs up for Spring or thumbs up for Quarkus? Okay, no one is speaking anything. So here is how I would give points to. I would give points to Quarkus here for the live reloading feature, because that saves the developer time and it also loads pretty fast. So at the end of the day, it helps us in reducing the time consumed to deliver an application. Developer, he only has to think about writing the code and not to worry about compilation, restarting the server again.
But we can use dev tools, right? In Spring Boot.
That's an additional plugin which again consumes the memory. So we are fighting against memory and time. So on the second or first day, I did mention that when we develop a big e-commerce application, either from WCS, which is HCL Commerce, or Hybris, or any other technologies. So WCS comes with inbuilt live changes functionality. So we go ahead, but we need to start the server and debug. But to achieve similar functionality in Spring, we have to depend on different plugins. And whenever we plug in any third-party plugin into our application, we have a risk of security. We have a risk of memory usage and performance. Hope that clarifies your thought.
Yes.
Okay, so that is one of the reasons I would prefer Quarkus compared to Spring from development perspective. Now let's go ahead and check what other points I have. So the chart which I showed you, these are few of the numbers which I captured. Startup time, but these I captured earlier, not while I was showing you the demo. The build artifact time. So what we notice here is almost in all these scenarios, Quarkus Bro beats Spring Boot. And when we run the Quarkus native image, the native image is even faster. So these are the metrics against which I have captured these numbers. I'll switch to next slide. Now, few of the benefits which I could come up for Quarkus was, it has a very simple documentation. Anyone who is a beginner in Java can go ahead and follow the Quarkus documentation. Hot reload, which I'm calling it as live reload, that is not available in Spring Boot. It's a specific feature of Quarkus. Now, Quarkus is developed on JAX-RS, one of the new Java specification. Quarkus is faster. I already showed you the metrics of the numbers where Quarkus is faster compared to Spring Boot. Now, since Quarkus is built on JAX-RS, it has continuous improvements, which is one of the new Java specification. What are the benefits of Spring Boot? So Spring Boot is in market since long time, right? Quarkus has hardly come like 3 or 4 years ago. So Spring has a better community health. Spring Boot has excellent documentation and outstanding community support. It has low costs, extensive features like auto configuration, starters, and YAML support. Helps developers take care of most of the boilerplate coding and reduces overall costs. But coming to the boilerplate coding part, Quarkus also provides similar feature. So I would not give Spring Boot a real win here, but yeah, this is a benefit of using Spring Boot. Spring Boot has faster input and output operations compared to Quarkus. The best thing which I like about Spring is its security. So out of the box, Spring provides you few of the security plugins, which is not available in Quarkus, which is only available in Quarkus via third-party or Spring plugins. So in security perspective, I would give a win or a point to Spring Boot compared to Quarkus. Yes, Quarkus comes with the security stuff, and we can find its documentation, which all security technique Quarkus uses. Almost similar to Spring, but still Spring have an edge over Quarkus because Spring has been around since long time and Quarkus has recently been. So these are few of the benefits of Spring. Now, the configuration profile. And this is one of the important factor from development perspective, not from the end functionality perspective. So while we are developing an application in Spring, for each specific environment, we have to go ahead and come up with a property file. So let's say application for test environment, I'll have a file called application test. For dev environment, I might have application-dev dot properties. And in those, we will go ahead and define our messages. However, what Quarkus uses is it has some sort of, we call it as profile. By default, the profiles are dev, test, prod, and custom. The name signifies what these, for which environment it refers to. Now, we will have a single application.property file. We don't have to maintain like 3 or 4 or environment-specific property file. The only thing which we have to define is the profile. And on the fly, these profiles will be passed to these values, to these variables, which reduces the maintenance of the code. So we have one single file, we are passing the profile. So these profile dynamically will be passed as, okay. We will just have app.hello message, right? And the profile will be passed dynamically as dev, and the message will change to hi from dev. If the test profile is passed dynamically, the message we can tweak the message to hi from test. So a single file by passing the profile can be easy to maintain the application rather than going ahead and define same values in multiple or environment specific files. Hope this makes sense. So this thing I'm talking about in code, if you would like to see, I'm talking about the application.properties. So in Spring, we will have, this is a demo application, but when we are building a real-time project, when we are delivering a project, we have different environments from dev, test, prod, LT, UAT, etc. So maintaining those application properties is like copy pasting the code, hence increasing the boilerplate coding in multiple files. So that is again one of the benefit of Quarkus. Now both Spring and Quarkus supports JPA, by which we can persist the data in the database. But what Spring doesn't provide is the panache entity. So the moment, with the help of panache in Quarkus, we already saw this demo yesterday, we were able to reduce our code to one-liner. So we were just telling conference dot. So I've taken an example of conference. Yesterday, we were dealing with person entity. So person entity was extending the panache entity. And then to perform CRUD operations on the database, we were just specifying one-liner code. So that again reduces the boilerplate coding which is required for DAO classes. This is again one of the awesome features from development perspective. So if I go through all these basic features, what I would conclude is both Spring, it's not like those things doesn't happen in Spring or like some entire functionality is missing in Spring. Spring has almost everything. And it has been around since long back. So both Quarkus and Spring are extensive framework for developing and deploying Java-based enterprise application. Which one you should choose? It totally depends on the project requirement, right? So both are extensive framework. Quarkus is a newer framework, but more innovative than Spring Boot. It boosts fast application boot times, live coding features, and an overall excellent developer experience. The main issue is less community support and lack of beginner-friendly resources. So when I say beginner-friendly resource, nowadays it has been improved in terms of documentation. So anyone can go ahead and visit the documentation of Quarkus, and it's easy to follow. But since Spring has been around since a long time, most of the developers, they are familiar with Spring Boot. On the other hand, Spring Boot is a mature, well-known, and stable. It has extensive features, template design patterns, and is highly secure. It also has an excellent documentation and community support, which can help solve the majority of issues faced during development. The major con of Spring Boot are poorer performance and higher memory consumption compared to Quarkus. This was the demo which I showed you in the beginning of our today's session. Therefore, choosing between Quarkus and Spring Boot for building your application will depend on the requirement of your project, technological preferences, and developer skill. So let's say if a developer is very well versed in Spring Boot, he will obviously choose Spring Boot over Quarkus. But let's say a beginner who have no exposure either to Spring Boot or to Quarkus, but he knows Java, he might find developing application in Quarkus quicker and easier compared to Spring. So that was like a quick summary of Spring Boot versus Quarkus. Now, I'll pause here. I'll wait for questions from you guys, if any.
So do we have any project in Deloitte who works on Quarkus as of now?
So there are internal projects available, but I haven't heard of, since Quarkus is new, right? So I haven't heard of any project which we have delivered in Quarkus. So
Okay.
Deloitte is still figuring out how we deliver in Quarkus. I think our deep dive session is one of the first which has happened in Quarkus. Prior to this, I don't think any Quarkus demo or Quarkus training has happened earlier. So this is like the onset of Quarkus in Deloitte. And hopefully we'll build awesome applications using Quarkus in future. And this training which we have done past 3 days should be helpful to you folks. What about other questions?
Yeah, so Nitin, one question.
Mhm.
Yeah, so you said like in Quarkus, as security perspective, other than third party, we don't have existing dependency or existing features for security, right?
No. Let me rephrase myself. That wouldn't be a correct statement. So what I would say, Quarkus does have support for security. Compared to Spring, Spring has better security features than Quarkus. That doesn't mean Quarkus doesn't have security features. So if I would go to the documentation of Quarkus, let me check if I can find any. I'll quickly pull it up here. Just give me a moment. All right, so this is the. So what I meant by telling Quarkus is not as secure as Spring. By that, I meant Spring Boot, since it is mature, it has better security compared to Quarkus because it is still growing. That doesn't mean basic security things are not available in Quarkus. Quarkus definitely is secure. And here is the summary of it. So OAuth is there, small ray JWT authentication is there. So you can go through this article. It will provide you like all the concepts which are used in securing the Quarkus application. Spring uses similar security features, but it has more exhaustive security features compared.
Yeah, got it.
Right. So Quarkus does support all these basic authentication types. It's not like it's not secure. So that's why I would rephrase my statement telling Quarkus Spring is slightly better secured since it is mature compared to Quarkus. Hope that clarifies, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So please don't infer from that statement that Quarkus is not secure. It is definitely secure. And all these security patterns which we follow in our projects while delivering, so they are available in Quarkus. So basic form of HTTP authentication, web authentication, manual TLS, all these things which you can think of, cross-origin resource sharing. So everything is available. And Quarkus has a very awesome documentation. When you guys have some time, visit this portal. It will, I mean, most of these things we have already discussed in our deep dive session, but we only covered like 3 days, right? So there are a hell lot of other topics to explore in Quarkus. Please go through these and you will find Quarkus easy to learn and easy to implement. Any other questions?
So since Spring and Quarkus uses Maven, right? Basically, like build tool can be. Can we reuse the libraries which are developed in Spring in Quarkus?
Yes, we can. So one such example which I can show you is, so I was always, I mean, in today's session, we were comparing Spring Boot versus Quarkus. But if we see Spring Boot libraries are available in Quarkus. So Spring Boot. This is Quarkus extension for Spring Boot properties. So even Spring libraries are available in Quarkus. It's not like it is not available. And that is the reason why I was mentioning that for beginners, Quarkus is an awesome tool to develop applications. All the plugins which you can think of, most of the plugins, you can reuse those Spring Boot plugins in Quarkus. And it has a pretty exhaustive list to cater our requirement nowadays. So most of the time we build REST application. All the REST libraries, dependencies are available here. REST client, JSON, JAXP, GraphQL. Right? So library support for all those dependencies is available. Then to persist data, what we did yesterday was integrating MongoDB with Quarkus. But Quarkus has support for all the popular databases, MySQL, H2, PostgreSQL, and for all these Panache libraries, so Hibernate ORM with Panache. And what we already saw what Panache does. The moment you extend Panache entity, you just have to write one line of coding and your data will be either persisted in the database, updated in the database, and so on. So that's the beauty of Panache. All the JDBC drivers are also supported. So this is a pretty exhaustive list.
Got it. And do we have any tools or utilities which help us to migrate Spring applications to Quarkus? Or
I am not sure if there is a direct tool available right now, which could migrate Spring to Quarkus application. I mean, at the end of the day, what we are doing is these are the tools to make an application, right?
yeah.
So it wouldn't make much sense to convert a Spring project to a Quarkus, because the end
No,
goal of developer is to develop an application rather than migrate from one tool to the other. Since
got
we are
it. But I
still in
think
the
the advantages which you get when we move to Quarkus, like the time taken and the size, right? All those things still we can have them, right? I know.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and I haven't come across such scenarios where any tool is available. But here is what I can think of. So both of them, let's say if we are using Maven as the build tool, right? What we can do is we can take the Quarkus application, Spring application, POM 5, take its POM, copy paste in Quarkus POM, and hopefully it should work. So when I say copy paste, don't straight away go ahead and copy paste it, because POM might have different property names, right? So what we have to ensure is we have to go ahead and pull all those dependencies and then open the project using Quarkus. It should work.
Okay.
But I don't think right now any tool is available which directly migrates from Spring to Quarkus. So we will have to do some manual interpretation. So that's why choosing Quarkus or choosing Spring Boot should be the first step before we start building the application. And I already showed you the metrics which you should consider to build an application using Quarkus. Those metrics are the performance, developer's joy, Kubernetes tailored application. So one thing which I missed informing you guys is whenever we were bootstrapping the Quarkus application, these Docker files, these come out of the box. So nowadays everyone is migrating to Docker, a cloud, where these files comes in handy. But these bootstrap applications which are available in Spring, they are not Kubernetes tailored or they are not cloud tailored. Though we can plug in the cloud dependencies in the POM, but for Quarkus, we don't have to additionally go ahead and add those plugins. The Docker plugins are available out of the box. Let me know if that makes sense. Okay. What other questions? All right. I'll assume silence is no. Further questions? Then I'll bring the thank you slide. And thank you folks for joining the Quarkus deep dive session. Hopefully I was able to at least introduce Quarkus to you guys so that in future, if you have to build project on Quarkus, you have some exposure to this technology, to this framework. I'll go ahead and stop the recording now.